Hey, come here. I have something a little controversial to tell you. Seriously, I love scope creep. Seriously, I do. I love it. You have to give yourself some parameters to make it really work for you, but that's what we're going to talk about today. So, come on, let's do this thing. We are going to raise a glass. We are going to think tank how to bring more creative freedom, more financial freedom, and more free time into your life as a design entrepreneur. I'm Sandra Funk, and this is Design Sips. Cheers. Scope creep. First things first, what is it? Scope creep is when you're in an existing client relationship, you have defined scope and possibly a defined fee or a defined fee structure. You have a defined timeline, right? You have the parameters of what you're doing, and then all of a sudden the client says, you know what I was thinking? What if we actually add the powder room to this project and we get it all updated just like the rest of the plan? You're already busy, you're already slammed, there's already a lot going on, and you've already set up the financials and the timeline. So scope creep can be seen as a negative or seen as a positive. I'm going to show you how to make it totally positive. Back in the day, Sandra, before she had her boundaries locked down, her stand in the space mojo working, and my flat fee in place, I had this project. Beautiful project, amazing, everything positive, yay, exciting, right? But it kept growing. And I was charging hourly at the time. So you think that scope creep when you're hourly is just, you're gonna just bill more time and it's all gonna be fine. The problem was I had other clients, I had other engagements, I didn't have control of my pipeline and how long this project was gonna take or how many resources it was going to take. And it just kept growing and developing, and the next thing you knew, we were like, it was an interior project, and the next thing you knew, the scope was totally including the entire backyard and tons of hardscaping, adding in layers and layers of additional trades and vendors and more meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. And while that all sounds good, and I was certainly compensated beautifully because again, I was charging hourly, the outcome at the end of the project left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. At the end of the project, the clients were shocked at how much they had spent because I was never stopping at re-estimating. At least even when you're doing hourly, you should stop and re-estimate what the total is going to be. Set up a new timeline, set up new parameters for, can I take on this work? Do I have the team in place? Do I have the capacity to keep going with these weekly meetings that are 4-hour meetings now because it's the interior architect and the exterior architect and the landscape, like, oh my God, the layers. Do I have capacity? Can I handle this? And then so much more important, a total top line budget estimate and timeline estimate for the clients. At the end of the day, the project turned out beautiful. And again, I was compensated handsomely. The clients had a bad taste in their mouth because they had no idea how much that was all going to add up to and how long that was going to take. So you can see now when I have scope creep, I go right back to the beginning of my process. When someone tells me that there is a change that needs to happen outside of our current parameters, 1 round of revisions per conceptual design and detailed design, blah, 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 I then say to them, no problem. I love that idea as well. Let's make that change, or I don't love that idea and I'm going to show you why. But essentially, I'm going to noodle on that change, that request, and I'm going to send over a proposal for the additional design fee to do that work, as well as the new timeline to execute that work. Okay, so now every time that there's scope creep, even little scope creep, for instance, the other day, we're a big project and the mudroom cabinetry, when it's all said and done, you know, everything is ordered, everything is under construction, we're about to go to final shops, or we're looking at final shops for the mudroom cabinetry, and the client is wondering if maybe we should tweak this and maybe we should tweak that. They've had another child, things in their lives are shifting, totally cool. I'm in agreement with the proposed changes. They're totally reasonable. It's just a shift. It's not changing my design aesthetic at all. So I let them know that I'll send over the proposal to do those changes as well as an estimate on how long it'll take me. And I go ahead and I outline. I'm gonna go back to the CAD and make adjustments. I'm going to re-PDF the set. I'm gonna go back to them to show it to them. They're gonna have one round of edits again, of course. I'm then gonna go back to the CAD and make those adjustments. I'm then gonna bubble and note everything, get it over to the architect and make sure that the wider team has the new updated program in place. Once I have their final approval now, after that round of revisions, I send the entire packet over to the cabinet maker for his final shops. I will then review his final shops with the changes against my original design. As you can see, once I start to explain to a client what a change entails, it's obvious to them that there should be an additional fee to make that change and additional time to make that change as well. Communicate, 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 and never, ever, ever look at scope creep negatively again for you because you're giving yourself the time and the fee to do it right, or the client because they also could have made the decision there, you know what, we don't want to spend the additional money or take the additional time to make this change, we're going to keep it like it was. But it's their choice, right? If we don't empower them with all of the information, how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, we can end up with that negative, bad taste in their mouth at the end of the project, especially if they're not hearing from you on what it's going to cost, what it's going to take time-wise. You can imagine how the scope can just keep changing. It really does help clients think twice about, brainstorming or just shooting ideas around after a design is sealed when they know that there's going to be financial and time implications attached. So my advice to you, take even the smallest thing, like a little cabinetry change, and educate your clients on what that looks like to make a change outside of your included changes. And that little education goes a really long way to make sure that all of a sudden you're not running 500 changes and everything ends up totally out of control and outside of their parameters or what their expectations were. Yes? Yes. Cheers. So now I want to walk you through what it looks like internally when we have scope creep. So when a client says, I'm going to add the room, right? Let's add the powder room to the project. We may as well get it going while we're here, right? So you're like, no problem. I love that idea. I'm not only going to give them the new financial estimates, the new timeline estimates, I'm also going to give them the new estimates on how much I think they're going to be spending on furnishings. And then internally, I'm also going to put together a new design agreement with that clarified scope that oversees this new piece of scope with the clarity of what we're working on and what that all is going to entail. As well as I go back to my design process and I duplicate that process and we start a whole new project with a new timeline to make sure that absolutely nothing falls through the crack when we're doing add-on scope. The most important thing here to remember is that adding on scope does not mean rushing it or squeezing it into the current timeline or squeezing it into the current fee, and certainly not giving it its due and going through step by step by step and doing your whole design process right from the beginning for that new scope. It is so important when the scope is something like adding a room to go all the way back to the beginning, from the design agreement to all the estimates to signed contracts to starting over with your process so that nothing falls through the crack at all. All right, cheers to that. Here's why scope creep is so incredibly amazing. You're already working with a client that knows, loves, and trusts you, right? And you're not going to say yes to scope creep unless it's with a client that you want to broaden your business with, right? If they're a PITA, the answer is going to be, I don't have capacity to take on more work right now. So let's say you're excited about scope creep because they are a great client. It's literally perfect. We know how much effort and time goes into every new client that we sign. And then the onboarding program is lengthy and costly, right? We kind of need to go through how we work and the whole dance. And, we're kind of getting them up to speed on what it looks like to work with us. There might be some times where you have to remind new clients of the procedure, of the communication parameters, really of the boundaries that encase your business. When you have scope creep with an existing client, it's beautiful. They know exactly what the program is. They know that this is going to get added into their Friday email. They know just what it's like to work with you, and it's such an honor that they want to expand that business with your firm. So once you have your boundaries in place with scope creep, it is literally my favorite word to hear from my favorite clients. Mindset around giving yourself what you need, right? Not a potential client. Where's my furniture with blip, 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 blip. Speaking of hot topics, if your clients are constantly asking you, where is my furniture? You may want to go check out our video on how to really contain and work through all of the delays that we're working with strategically, efficiently, and with your whole heart in a very good place. Check it out, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.